In the heart of Hogwarts, nestled deep within the rolling hills of Scotland, there was a hidden corner of the magical world, a place where time seemed to slow down, where magic lingered in the air like a soft, comforting breeze. This was a place where Quidditch matches echoed across the skies, where the wind whispered secrets to those who listened, and where each day felt like a beautiful, timeless story unfolding tonight. As the last rays of the sun dipped beneath the horizon, a quiet peace settled over the castle. The light from the lamps cast a gentle glow through the large windows, and the soft rustle of leaves from the forbidden forest drifted through the air. In the distance, the faint sound of laughter and chatter from the common rooms could be heard, but it was all distant and soothing, like a lullaby sung just out of reach. Within this calm, a sleepy Quidditch story was about to unfold, one that would carry us to the heights of the stadium, where the wind seemed to sing its own song. You see, there was a broomstick in this story, but it wasn't like any other broomstick you might have seen before. It had waited for so long, perhaps even longer than most could remember. This broomstick, though forgotten by many, still stood waiting in the dimly lit corners of the Quidditch locker room. But why, you might wonder, would a broomstick wait for so long? And what made it so special? As the evening air grew cooler and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, this was a moment in time when all things felt possible. The quiet hum of the castle and the soft flicker of candles felt like an invitation to sit back and listen, to drift deeper into a magical world where mystery and wonder were part of the very fabric of existence. Let's settle in together, shall we? Perhaps, if you enjoy this tale, you'll want to join us for more, where we explore the magic of the wizarding world and the mysteries hidden within. But for now, let's begin this journey together. Let the soothing sounds of the night guide you as we start our story, where even the broomsticks have a story to tell. In the cozy confines of the Hogwarts Quidditch locker room, where the smell of polish and broomstick wax filled the air, a familiar figure was settling in for the evening. Harry Potter, now in his 6th year, had spent countless hours in this very room, preparing for matches and dreaming of victories. His emerald green eyes glimmered with the memories of the past, yet there was a thoughtful calm about him tonight, as if something was pulling at his attention. Beside him, Ron Weasley, ever the loyal friend, was lazily tossing a quaffle from hand to hand. His red hair, still messy from a long day of practice, fell across his forehead. His smile, as wide and mischievous as always, softened as he looked around at the empty locker room, taking in the quiet of the evening. "Harry, mate, you're awfully quiet tonight," Ron remarked, tossing the quaffle up into the air and catching it effortlessly. "What's on your mind?" Harry didn't immediately answer. Instead, he gazed across the room, his eyes lingering on an old, forgotten broomstick tucked in the far corner. It wasn't the Nimbus 2000 or the Firebolt, broomsticks that flew like lightning, giving their riders an exhilarating thrill. No, this broomstick was an old-school clean sweep, its wood dulled and weathered with age, yet it somehow felt like it belonged there, watching over the room like an old guardian. "You ever notice that broom, Ron?" Harry asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Ron glanced over and frowned. That old thing? I think it's been here forever, hasn't it? Looks like it hasn't flown in years. Harry's gaze softened as he nodded slowly. Yeah, it has, but something about it feels special, like it's waiting for something or someone. Ron gave a half laugh, but there was a touch of curiosity in his idle eyes. Waiting? For what? A chance to get back into the game? I don't know, Harry replied, his voice thoughtful. It's just a feeling, was it, that I have. The two friends stood in the quiet room, the flickering light from the lanterns casting long shadows across the walls. There was a quiet magic in the air, a kind of stillness that invited discovery. As Harry continued to gaze at the broomstick, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow alive with anticipation, as if it had a story it longed to tell. The room was calm, with only the soft rustling of their robes and the distant hum of the castle settling into night. Harry took a slow step toward the broomstick, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the smooth, weathered wood. As he touched it, there was a gentle spark, just a flicker, but enough to make Harry pause. The broomstick trembled slightly, as if it had been awakened after a long, deep slumber. "Did you see that?" Harry whispered, turning toward Ron, who was now looking at him with a mix of surprise and confusion. "What was that? Was that magic?" Ron's voice was laced with both disbelief and wonder. "I think so," Harry replied, his heart beginning to race just a little. "But it's not like any magic I've ever felt before." Harry reached out again, his hand hovering just above the broomstick's handle. This time, he focused his thoughts, trying to sense whatever it was that had stirred the broomstick. The flickering light seemed to grow warmer, the shadows deeper, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Slowly, he touched the broomstick once more. This time, the room seemed to come alive, with a soft hum, as though the broomstick was reacting to something deep within Harry's touch. For a moment, everything was still. Then, with a soft creak, the broomstick began to tremble again, but this time it lifted gently from the ground. The movement was slow at first, almost tentative, as though it was testing the air, unsure of itself. "Harry, it's flying," Ron murmured, eyes wide with astonishment. But the broomstick didn't just lift into the air. It hovered, as though waiting for something more. A ripple of energy seemed to pulse from the handle, spreading outward like a warm, inviting wave. Suddenly, Harry felt a soft tug at his sleeve, a gentle but persistent pull. He glanced over at Ron, who was staring wide-eyed at the broomstick. "It's like it's calling to you," Ron whispered, almost in awe. Harry nodded slowly. "It does feel like that. It's waiting for something, or maybe would for someone." With a soft breath, Harry reached forward, his hand wrapping around the broomstick's handle. The moment his fingers touched it fully, a surge of warmth flooded through him, and for a brief second, he felt as though the entire room had vanished. He was soaring through the air, above the castle, over the vast grounds, with nothing but the soft wind and the stars for company. It wasn't a harsh wind, no. It was a gentle, soothing breeze that embraced him, guiding him effortlessly. The broomstick moved with a calm grace, almost as if it had been waiting for this very moment, for Harry to be the one to bring it back to life. And then, as quickly as it had started, the sensation faded. The broomstick gently lowered back to the ground, its motion slow and deliberate. Harry found himself back in the locker room, standing gaze at the still hovering broomstick. "What just happened?" Ron asked, his voice full of wonder. "That was different." Harry looked at the broomstick, which now seemed to hum quietly, as though it had been restored to its rightful place. "I think it's not just a broomstick," Harry said quietly. "It's waiting for something, or someone, and maybe that someone is me." The Quidditch locker room was quiet, save for the occasional soft creak of the wooden beams overhead. Harry Potter stood at the far end of the room, his eyes fixed on the broomstick that seemed to be calling to him. The room was dimly lit by the flickering lights of enchanted lanterns that swayed gently with the breeze. The smell of old wood and the faint scent of polish filled the air, a comforting mixture that reminded Harry of years of training, laughter, and the shared joy of Quidditch matches. Harry stood there for a moment, lost in thought. His mind, usually sharp and focused, wandered in that quiet space. It wasn't often that he felt such a deep sense of calm, especially in the middle of a Quidditch season. Normally, he would be bouncing with excitement before the next match, filled with the thrill of the chase for the golden snitch. But tonight, something felt different. The broomstick in front of him had an energy that Harry couldn't quite explain, an energy that seemed to speak directly to him. He glanced over at his best friend, Ron Weasley, who was standing by the lockers, carelessly tossing a quaffle between his hands. Ron was his constant companion in nearly every adventure and misadventure at Hogwarts. With his freckled face and a mop of untamed red hair, he was as loyal as they came. He'd been by Harry's side through thick and thin, and there was never a dull moment when Ron was around. But tonight, even Ron's usual banter didn't seem to cut through the calm air of the room. "Hey, Harry." Ron's voice broke through the quiet, and Harry turned to look at him. Ron's smile was soft, his eyes still glimmering with that mischievous twinkle, even in the peaceful quiet of the locker room. "You've been staring at that broom for a while now. What's going on?" Harry shifted his gaze from the broomstick back to Ron, and for a moment, he didn't answer. Ron was right. He had been staring at it for what felt like hours. There was something about the broom that made it impossible to ignore. It wasn't the newest model, not like his beloved Firebolt or even the Nimbus 2000, no. This broom was an old, worn clean sweep, far from the usual Quidditch standards, but it had an unmistakable presence, something that pulled Harry in like a magnet. "It's just," Harry began, his voice trailing off as he struggled to put into words the strange pull he felt. "I don't know, Ron. It's like this broom is waiting for something, like it's been forgotten, but it's not just some old broom. It feels different." Ron gave Harry a skeptical look, but there was no mocking in his expression, only curiosity. He tilted his head, studying the broom as if seeing it for the first time. "Wait, you're telling me this broom is alive?" You've been around the magical world long enough to know that doesn't happen. Harry couldn't help but smile at Ron's skepticism. I know, it sounds mad, but I'm telling you, something feels strange. It's like it's calling to me. I can't explain it. Ron's eyes flickered toward the broomstick, and for a moment, Harry could see the same curiosity that he felt beginning to spark in Ron. I guess it doesn't hurt to check it out, does it? With a soft chuckle, Harry shook his head. No, I suppose not. But it's not just about checking it out. I feel like there's something more to it, like it has a purpose I don't fully understand yet. Ron gave a casual shrug and took a few steps forward, still toying with the quaffle. Well, if you ask me, this broomstick probably just needs a good polish and a ride. But if you're really feeling it, mate, who am I to stop you? Harry gave Ron a grateful look. Even if he didn't quite understand it, Ron's easygoing nature had always made him the perfect companion for any mystery. They both shared the belief that when it came to the magical world, it was always better to investigate than to ignore. Still, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this broom than met the eye. As he took a step closer to it, he caught Ron's gaze again, and the two of them shared a moment of understanding. Sometimes, the answers weren't always clear right away, but that didn't mean they wouldn't come. With a deep breath, Harry finally walked toward the broomstick, his hand reaching out to touch it. The air around him seemed to shed a subtle change in the atmosphere that was just enough to make Harry pause. Ron, sensing the change, stood silently beside him, his eyes now fixed on the broomstick, waiting for whatever was to come next. This was a moment that Harry could feel was important, though he didn't yet know how or why. But something told him that tonight, things were about to become a little more magical than he had ever imagined. The broomstick, a weathered clean sweep, stood still in the quiet of the locker room, its dark wood gleaming faintly in the lantern light. Harry's hand hovered just above the handle. A soft hum filled the air around him, subtle but unmistakable. It wasn't the usual hum of magic. This was something deeper, older, almost like the broom itself was alive, aware of his presence. He glanced at Ron, whose eyes were wide with curiosity, watching Harry's every movement with the kind of focus he typically reserved for a game-winning goal. The silence stretched between them, only broken by the soft whisper of wind outside the castle windows, and Harry could feel the pull of something magical, something unspoken. It was as if the broomstick knew that Harry had come to discover its secrets, and it was waiting for him to take the first step. "Harry, mate," Ron said softly, breaking the stillness. "You sure about this?" Harry hesitated, his fingers barely brushing the broom's handle, but could feel the warmth of the broomstick's magic beneath his fingertips, like the pulse of a heartbeat. But it was more than that. It was as though the broom was calling out to him, beckoning him to trust it, to connect with it in a way that went beyond any Quidditch match he had ever played. "Yeah," Harry replied, his voice almost a whisper. "I think so." He wrapped his fingers around the broomstick's handle, the cool wood comforting against his palm. As soon as he did, a jolt of energy rushed through him, like a spark of lightning that coursed from the broom to his very core. He gasped, stumbling back slightly, but the broomstick remained firmly in his grip, its weight grounding him. The room around him seemed to blur, and for a moment, he was no longer in the locker room. The world shifted. One moment, Harry was standing in the familiar locker room at Hogwarts. The next, he was standing on a vast, grassy plain under a sky that stretched out like an endless canvas of stars. His breath caught in his throat. The stars above were so bright, so close, they seemed to be watching him, waiting. The soft hum of magic was still there, but now it was joined by the gentle rustle of wind, the familiar sound of the Quidditch pitch as it whispered in the distance. He looked down. The broomstick had vanished from his grip, but beneath his feet, the familiar feeling of the broomstick's handle pressed against him, as though it had merged with the ground beneath him. He was standing on a Quidditch pitch, but not any pitch he recognized. This one seemed ancient, the grass dark and lush with age. The air felt thick with the energy of countless matches, of players long forgotten, of the wind that had carried them all through the skies. It was as if the very essence of Quidditch itself had woven itself into this place. "Harry, what's happening?" Ron's voice rang out in the distance, but it didn't sound quite like Ron. It was more like an echo of his voice, far away, as if it were being carried to him through some magical barrier. Harry turned, but there was no sign of Ron or anyone. The pitch seemed empty, abandoned, forgotten by time. The only thing that remained was the broomstick, now lying on the ground in front of him, as though waiting for him to mount it once more. It was still the same old clean sweep, but now it seemed different. There was a glow to it, a faint golden aura that surrounded the broomstick, as though it had been waiting for Harry to arrive. Slowly, Harry stepped forward and crouched beside it, his fingers brushing the worn wood once again. The instant his skin made contact, the broom began to hum with power, pulsing like a living thing. The golden light grew brighter, surrounding him in a warm embrace, and Harry felt himself being drawn to it, pulled forward like a magnet. Without thinking, Harry straddled the broomstick, his legs settling into the familiar position. As soon as he did, the broom surged to life beneath him. He gripped the handle tightly, but instead of the typical sensation of flight, this time, the broom seemed to respond with a calm, steady force. It didn't rush him forward as other brooms did. No, this broom was slow and deliberate, gliding gently through the air with a kind of grace that Harry had never felt before. It was as though the broom and Harry were in perfect harmony, moving as one through this strange, otherworldly pitch. The wind carried him gently upward, and Harry allowed the sensation to wash over him. The air was crisp and cool, the stars overhead twinkling in a way that made the entire scene feel dreamlike. The broom glided higher, but it did so at a leisurely pace, giving Harry time to take in the surroundings. The pitch was vast, the grass so green it almost shimmered in the night, and the stands were empty, as if they had witnessed countless matches in the past, but were now silent, standing in quiet reverence. As Harry flew, he could feel the broom's connection to the world around him. He wasn't just flying through the air, he was part of the very fabric of the place, a part of the magic that had woven itself into the Quidditch pitch. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever felt before, and for a moment, he forgot all about the usual excitement of the game. There was no snitch to catch, no opponents to outmaneuver. It was just him, the broomstick, and the vast open sky. But then, something caught his eye. Off in the distance, near the edge of the pitch, there was a faint glimmer of light. It was soft, like the light of a distant star, but it seemed to be calling to him. Slowly, Harry guided the broom toward it, his movements fluid and calm. The closer he got, the more the light seemed to pulse, glowing brighter and brighter until it became a beacon in the darkness. As he reached the edge of the pitch, the broom slowed, and Harry was gently guided to the ground. The light was no longer far away. It was right in front of him, hovering just above the ground. He dismounted from the broomstick, his feet touching the grass with a soft crunch, and took a step closer to the light. There, in the center of the glowing sphere, was an object, a small, golden key. It floated in midair, surrounded by the soft light, as though waiting for him to take it. Harry reached out, his fingers brushing against the cool metal, and as soon as he touched it, a rush of magic surged through him. A voice, ancient and calm, echoed in his mind. Only the one who has waited may unlock the path. The words were clear, but they made no sense. What path? What was this key for? But before Harry could ask another question, the light faded, and the pitch seemed to dissolve around him. The broomstick was no longer beneath him, and the sky was gone, replaced by the familiar walls of the Quidditch locker room. He was back at Hogwarts, standing in front of the broomstick, which now lay silently on the floor, its magic settled. Ron was staring at him, his face a mix of confusion and awe. "Harry, mate, you okay? You looked like you were somewhere else." Harry blinked, his heart still racing from the intensity of the vision. The golden key was no longer in his hand, but somehow he felt its weight deep inside him, a lingering presence that didn't quite belong to this world. "I'm not sure," Harry said softly, his voice distant. "But I think this broomstick, it's more than just a broom. It's part of something bigger, and it's waiting for me to understand." Ron's eyes widened, but he said nothing. He simply watched as Harry stared down at the broomstick, now resting quietly on the floor, waiting for whatever was to come next. The mystery had only just begun. The broomstick lay silently in the corner of the locker room, its worn surface gleaming faintly in the dim light, as though it held some secret within. Harry could still feel the lingering hum of magic from his earlier experience, the way the broom had carried him through the air, across the vast, glowing pitch, under the watchful eyes of stars. And though everything appeared calm on the surface, Harry's mind buzzed with questions that refused to quiet. He looked down at his hand, instinctively checking for the golden key, the one that had appeared in his vision. But it was gone. The weight of it had vanished the moment he had returned to the locker room, leaving him with nothing but the faintest memory of its cool metal and the strange voice that had whispered to him, "Only the one who has waited may unlock the path." What path? What had the key unlocked? and why had it felt so important? Harry glanced at Ron, who was still standing by the lockers, now shifting his weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable with the stillness of the room. "Harry," Ron said, his voice laced with unease, "you've been staring at that broom for a long time. What happened? I've never seen you like this." Harry hesitated. He wasn't entirely sure what had happened himself. How could he explain the strange vision, the vast Quidditch pitch that wasn't real, and the golden key that had seemed to call to him? It all felt like a dream wrapped in layers of magic, but one that was too vivid to ignore. "I don't really know how to explain it," Harry began slowly, his voice distant. "But when I touched the broom earlier, it took me somewhere, someplace different. And there was this light, this key. I think the broom is trying to show me something, Ron." Ron furrowed his brow, clearly confused, but there was no mockery in his gaze, only genuine curiosity. "So, it's not just a broom, is it? There's magic to it, something beyond Quidditch?" Harry nodded, though the certainty in his answer didn't go easily. "Yeah, it's like it's waiting for something, or maybe it's waiting for me to understand what's going on." Ron opened his mouth to respond, but paused, his expression shifting slightly. "Wait a second, Harry. Did you hear that?" Harry froze. He hadn't noticed it before, but now that Ron had pointed it out, he could hear it too. A soft, rhythmic tapping sound, like something gently tapping against the stone floor. It was faint at first, but it grew steadily louder, as though something, or someone, was moving closer. "What do you think that is?" Ron asked, his voice low. "I don't know," Harry replied, his voice barely above a whisper. His heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from something else, something instinctive. "But I think we need to find out." He took a few cautious steps toward the source of the sound, his eyes scanning the shadows. The tapping continued, and with each step, it seemed to draw closer until Harry's breath caught in his throat. The source of the sound was not a person nor an object, but something far stranger. Emerging from the darkness at the far end of the locker room was a shadow, a shape that shifted in the dim light. It seemed to flicker and sway, as if it were something not entirely solid. At first, Harry thought it might be a trick of the light, some shadow cast by a moving lantern, or perhaps a reflection in the polished wood of the lockers. But as the figure stepped closer, Harry realized that it was something more. It was a broomstick, but not like any broomstick he had ever seen before. The wood was dark and twisted, almost black, and the bristles at the base seemed to ripple as if they were alive. It hovered in midair, moving with a strange fluidity, the tapping sound emanating from its every movement, like the beat of a pulse. "Is that?" Ron began, his voice trailing off in disbelief. "Another broom?" Harry nodded, his eyes wide. "I think so, but it's not like the clean sweep. This one feels different." The broomstick floated toward them, moving with an eerie grace, its dark bristles brushing the floor with each tap. It stopped a few feet in front of Harry, hovering as though waiting for him to make the next move. The air around it seemed charged, thick with magic, and Harry could feel the familiar tug of energy, like the broom was beckoning him once again. "This is it," Harry murmured, his voice steady. "This is the path." He didn't know how he knew, but something inside him told him that this broom, this strange, dark broom, was connected to the key he had felt, the one that had vanished from his hand. The same magic that had pulled him through the air earlier now seemed to pulse in the very air around him, urging him to take the next step. Ron shifted uncomfortably beside him, his eyes fixed on the broom. "Harry, are you sure about this? That broom, it's not like any I've seen before. It's kind of creeping me out." "I know, Ron," Harry said softly, his eyes never leaving the dark broomstick. "But I think it's trying to show me something. I have to see what it wants." With a deep breath, Harry stepped forward. As he did, the broomstick seemed to respond, floating closer to him as if recognizing his presence. The tapping sound grew louder, more insistent, as if it were trying to communicate with him, to make him understand. "Harry, wait!" Ron called out, but Harry was already reaching for the broom's handle. The moment his fingers made contact, the world around him shifted again. This time, there was no Quidditch pitch, no vast sky or glowing stars. Instead, Harry found himself standing in a long, dark corridor. The walls were lined with ancient stone, and the air was thick with dust and cobwebs. The only light came from the soft glow of the broomstick, which floated beside him, casting long, wavering shadows across the cold stone floor. "This place," Harry murmured, looking around in confusion. "Where are we?" It wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. The corridor stretched on in both directions, endless and silent. But there was something familiar about it, something that tugged at the back of Harry's mind, like a memory he couldn't quite reach. The broomstick floated ahead, and Harry instinctively followed, the air growing colder with each step. As he moved deeper into the corridor, the walls began to change, the stone giving way to ancient carvings, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. The carvings depicted scenes of people on broomsticks, flying through vast skies, their figures twisting and turning in a graceful dance of flight. But in the center of the carvings was something more, something that caught Harry's eye. A figure, cloaked in shadow, holding a golden key. That's the key," Harry whispered, his breath coming in short bursts. "This is where it all began." The broomstick hovered in front of him, and Harry reached out, his fingers brushing against the glowing carvings. As soon as his hand made contact, the corridor seemed to tremble and the air shifted. The broomstick pulsed with energy, and the carving of the cloaked figure began to glow brighter, the key in its hand shimmering with a golden light. In that moment, Harry understood. This wasn't just a broomstick. This was a key, just like the golden one in his vision. It had led him here, to this hidden place within Hogwarts, a place that no one had ever seen before, and it was up to him to unlock whatever secret it held. But as the glow of the carvings intensified, the broomstick suddenly pulled away from him, floating higher into the air. Harry reached out, but the broom was already beginning to move, spiraling upward, leading him through the dark corridor toward an unknown destination. And Harry knew without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. Whatever was waiting for him, whatever path this broomstick was guiding him down, it was something that would change everything. Harry felt the pull of the broomstick once again, the way it seemed to move effortlessly through the air, as though it knew exactly where it wanted him to go. The mysterious corridor stretched endlessly ahead, the faint glow of the carvings illuminating the stone walls, leading Harry deeper into the heart of this hidden place beneath Hogwarts. The broomstick drifted just out of reach, circling higher and higher, always staying just a little ahead of him, as though teasing him, urging him to follow. Harry, entranced by its quiet power, found himself moving without hesitation. His feet carried him forward, step by step, into the dimly lit expanse of the corridor. The air grew cooler as he went, and he could hear the faint echo of his footsteps, though it was strangely quiet, as if the very stones of Hogwarts were holding their breath. Ron had stopped following him. Harry could feel his friend's absence behind him, but he wasn't scared. It wasn't fear that tugged at Harry's heart. It was the desire to understand. The broomstick, this strange and ancient thing, had led him here for a reason. Harry could feel that it was trying to tell him something important, something that needed to be uncovered. As the corridor continued, Harry's attention was drawn to the wall ahead. There, in the center of the corridor, was an archway framed by more glowing carvings. The carvings were different from the ones before. These were more intricate, more elaborate. The figures depicted in these new images were more detailed, their faces clearer, their eyes full of life and wisdom. There was something about them that made Harry stop, his gaze caught by a certain symbol. At the very top of the archway, a figure, cloaked in shadow, stood holding a key. The key was the same as the one from Harry's vision, the one he had touched earlier. But this time, the key was not glowing with golden light. Instead, it seemed to be etched in silver, its shape more refined, more delicate. The figure's eyes were not visible, hidden beneath the hood, but Harry could sense its presence as if it were watching him. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for the key. But the moment his fingers brushed the cold stone of the archway, the carvings began to glow brighter, and the broomstick, which had hovered a little ahead of him, suddenly swooped down, landing gracefully in front of Harry. The broomstick vibrated, humming louder, its bristles now fully alive with magic. It was as if it was urging Harry to act, to move forward, but still, something held him back. The sense of unease that had been growing in the pit of his stomach seemed to deepen. There was a pull, a quiet call from the broom, and yet Harry hesitated. He turned his head back to where Ron had last stood, but his friend was nowhere to be seen now. The space behind Harry was empty, the corridor stretching endlessly, silent and still. "Ron," Harry whispered into the air, his voice small, swallowed by the vastness of the corridor. But no answer came. The silence was deafening. Shaking off the sudden feeling of isolation, Harry turned back to the archway. The broomstick seemed to recognize his hesitation and moved once more, drifting through the air with an almost knowing grace, guiding him toward the arch. Taking a deep breath, Harry approached, each step reverberating in the silence of the corridor. He could feel the weight of the ancient place pressing down on him, and the broomstick seemed to pulse with energy as though it were awaiting something from him. He reached out, and when his fingers grazed the cool stone of the archway once more, the carvings shifted, slowly at first, but then with increasing speed. The walls around him seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as the archway slowly opened, revealing the darkness beyond. The broomstick floated closer, its light flickering softly, casting a warm glow over the dark passage beyond the arch. For a moment, Harry stood at the threshold, looking into the unknown. His heart beat in rhythm with the pulse of the broomstick's magic, both eager and uncertain. Suddenly, he heard something, a soft whisper, barely audible over the hum of magic that filled the air. "Harry." The whisper was faint, almost like a distant echo, but it carried with it a sense of urgency. The voice was familiar, but Harry couldn't place it. "Harry, come through." It was a command, gentle yet insistent, and Harry's gaze flickered toward the broomstick. The energy around it seemed to intensify, urging him forward. He stepped closer, moving with tentative resolve. As he crossed the threshold of the archway, the space around him seemed to shift, the corridor now gone, replaced by an open space that stretched endlessly. Harry was no longer standing in a stone passage, but in a wide, circular room. The floor beneath him was smooth and polished, the surface reflecting the faint glow of the broomstick's light. There was something ancient about this place, something timeless. The walls rose up around him, tall and curving, but there were no doors, no windows, only stone and shadow. The air was thick with magic, the kind of magic that made Harry's skin tingle, as if it were a part of something far greater than he could comprehend. And in the center of the room, there was a pedestal, a large, smooth stone structure carved with runes ipsos that pulsed with the same silver light as the key. On top of the pedestal, resting in an intricate cradle, was a small, delicate box. It was beautiful, elegant even, but there was something unsettling about it. The box seemed to hum with power, its presence filling the room with an undeniable sense of significance. Harry felt an odd pull toward it, the same way he had felt drawn to the broomstick earlier. The box seemed to be calling to him, urging him to open it. But before Harry could move closer, the broomstick hovered gently beside him. The air around him shifted, a subtle change in the magic that was woven through the room. The broomstick trembled, its bristles alive with a soft, crackling energy, and Harry could feel the weight of its presence, like a reminder of something long forgotten. It was as though the broomstick was warning him. The whisper returned, faint but clear. "Do not open it, Harry." It was a voice, but not one Harry recognized. It was soft, almost ethereal, like the wind itself, but the warning was undeniable. He paused, uncertainty gnawing at him. The broomstick hovered nearer, as if trying to convey its message in silence, its vibrations soft and steady, like a steady heartbeat. Harry had a choice, he realized. He could open the box, step forward into whatever secret lay hidden within it, or he could listen to the warning and leave it untouched. The magic in the air hummed with anticipation, and Harry could feel the weight of his decision heavy on his chest. But as Harry stood there, the whisper came again, louder this time, almost frantic. "Do not open it." Harry felt the room pulse with the magic that surrounded the box. Something ancient, something powerful lay within it. It was like a promise, a secret that the room had been holding for centuries, but it was not a secret that Harry was meant to unlock. With a deep breath, Harry stepped back from the pedestal, his eyes lingering on the box. He knew that this was not the right time to uncover whatever lay hidden inside. The broomstick seemed to approve of his decision, its hum growing softer, more satisfied, as though it had led him here for a reason. For a moment, Harry simply stood, the silence settling back around him. The magic in the air slowly began to fade, and the room, though still vast and mysterious, seemed to lose some of its tension. The broomstick hovered in front of him one last time, a soft, almost approving gesture, before it floated gently to the ground, its wood resting against the cool stone floor. Harry exhaled, his heart still racing from the weight of the decision he had just made. There was no immediate sense of danger now, no looming threat. The room was still, quiet, and peaceful once again, but he knew, deep down, that this moment was just one step in a far larger journey, a journey that was only just beginning. He turned slowly, his gaze falling back on the archway from which he had come. The corridor beyond was dark, silent, but Harry knew that it was waiting for him to return. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready to follow the broomstick, to uncover the secrets that it had shown him, and to unlock the mysteries that Hogwarts had hidden for so long. Harry stood still, the soft hum of the broomstick's magic still lingering in the air. The room, though vast and mysterious, had begun to settle into an eerie calm. The pedestal, with the glowing box atop it, remained untouched, its presence as powerful as ever. Harry knew that the decision he had just made was only one part of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that was yet to be fully unraveled. For a moment, he simply stared at the pedestal, contemplating what had just happened. The voice, the warning, the strange magic, it all felt so far removed from the world he knew. Hogwarts, with all its wonder and excitement, had always been a place of magic, but this was different. This was deeper, older, and he wasn't entirely sure he was ready for it. But as the broomstick hovered gently nearby, its presence steady and comforting, Harry's thoughts began to settle. He knew that he couldn't ignore the path that had been laid before him. The broom had led him here, and it had given him a choice to open the box, to unlock whatever secret lay within it, or to leave it untouched, listening to the warning that echoed in his mind. The air around him seemed to thrum with energy, a quiet, invisible force that urged him forward, beckoning him to explore, to discover, but Harry also knew that with every decision, there were consequences. His instincts told him that the time to open the box had not yet come. But what if there was more to uncover? What if the box held the answers he sought? His gaze shifted from the box to the broomstick, which was now resting gently against the stone floor, its wooden surface smooth and polished. It was as if the broomstick itself were waiting for him to make the next move, to decide what path he would take. The room seemed to stretch around him, the stone walls rising high above him, twisting and turning in ways that Harry hadn't fully noticed before. The glow of the carvings on the walls had faded, but the faint outline of symbols remained, etched into the stone like an ancient language that no one had spoken in centuries. Harry stepped forward, his footsteps echoing softly in the stillness. He could feel the magic around him, wrapping around his mind like a soft, gentle breeze. The space felt both welcoming and unnerving, as if it were a threshold between the known world and something far more mysterious. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The broomstick had shown him that much. The time for hesitation had passed. The choice before him wasn't just about the box anymore. It was about the next step in his journey, the next discovery. He could turn back, leave the room, and perhaps never know what lay beyond the archway. Or he could continue to explore, follow the broomstick's silent guidance, and uncover the secrets that Hogwarts had kept hidden for so long. His heart beat in his chest, steady but quickening with the weight of the decision. He wasn't alone in this. Ron's absence was still keenly felt, but Harry knew that his friend was not far away. Ron had always been there for him, through thick and thin, and though he couldn't see him now, he could still feel his presence in the back of his mind. It was a comforting thought, but one that also reminded him that he could not rely on others to make these choices for him. This was Harry's journey, and it was up to him to navigate the path. The broomstick, now resting motionless on the floor, caught Harry's attention once more. It was as if it had a life of its own, a quiet pulse of energy that radiated from its wooden frame. Harry moved closer, his fingers grazing the broom's handle. The connection was immediate, as though the broom recognized him, as if it had always known that Harry would be the one to unlock its secrets. He glanced once more at the pedestal, the box still, resting there, untouched. The air felt heavy with potential. What lay within the box? What did it hold? He couldn't deny that curiosity burned within him, but there was still the voice in his mind, the warning that had come with such urgency. Slowly, Harry turned his back on the pedestal. He knew that the box was not the key to his answers. Not yet. The broomstick had guided him here, but it had also given him a choice: to proceed with caution or to charge forward without fully understanding the consequences. He couldn't rush this. The box might hold the answers, but it wasn't the time to seek them. Not yet. Instead, Harry decided to explore further. The corridor was still open behind him, its dark passage beckoning him with the promise of more discoveries. He turned, walking toward the archway through which he had entered this hidden space beneath Hogwarts. As he moved, he felt the broomstick follow him, its hum soft but steady, as though it were watching him, waiting for his next move. The air around him began to shift again, but this time it was different. The broomstick seemed to draw closer, its pulse of energy growing stronger. Harry felt a surge of magic as he walked, an invisible force that guided him forward with every step. He reached the archway, and as he passed beneath it, the world around him began to change once more. The stone corridor, the intricate carvings on the walls, all of it seemed to dissolve, fading away like mist in the wind. The space around him grew brighter, and for a moment, Harry could feel the coolness of the air against his skin, the faint touch of the night breeze, as if he were standing on the edge of the Quidditch pitch. But when he looked up, the pitch was gone. Instead, he stood on a wide, flat expanse, a vast open space that stretched in all directions. The ground beneath him was smooth and gray, like polished stone, and the sky above was a deep, cloudless black. Stars twinkled faintly, distant and cold, as though the entire universe was watching. At the center of the space stood another pedestal, this one far larger than the one in the hidden room. The pedestal was made of an unfamiliar stone, its surface covered in symbols that pulsed softly with a faint light. But what drew Harry's attention most was the object resting on top of it. It was another key, similar to the one he had seen in his vision, but this one was larger, its form intricate and delicate, with patterns carved into it that Harry couldn't quite understand. The key shimmered faintly in the dim light, as if it were alive, waiting for someone to take it. The broomstick floated beside him, its presence steady and calm. But this time, Harry wasn't sure what to do. The pedestal, the key, it all felt so familiar, like pieces of a puzzle he hadn't yet solved. The broomstick seemed to pulse gently, its energy a subtle push forward. This was a choice. He could take the key, continue his journey deeper into whatever world this was, or he could leave it untouched, just as he had left the box behind in the previous room. The broomstick had led him here for a reason, but Harry knew that not every mystery needed to be solved immediately. For a long moment, he simply stood there, staring at the key. The air around him hummed with possibilities, and the broomstick waited, its soft pulse of energy urging him forward. Finally, Harry took a deep breath, his decision clear in his heart. He wasn't ready for the key, not yet. There was more to understand, more to discover. The broomstick had shown him the way, but it was up to him to decide when the time was right to move forward. With one final glance at the pedestal, Harry turned away. The broomstick, now hovering beside him, seemed to approve. The journey wasn't over, it had only just begun. And Harry knew that the path ahead, however uncertain, was his to walk. The mystery of the broomstick, the key, and whatever lay beyond awaited him. But for now, he was content to explore, to learn, and to trust that the right choices would reveal themselves in time. The air was thick with magic, and the soft hum of the broomstick had settled into a calm rhythm beside Harry. The corridor, the pedestal, the keys, it all seemed to blend together in a hazy fog of uncertainty and wonder. He had made his choice, leaving behind the mysterious box and the ancient key on their respective pedestals, but the decision still weighed heavily on him. The more he thought about it, the more it felt like he was moving through a dream that he couldn't quite wake from, one that was layered with meaning, yet still elusive. The broomstick glided silently beside him, as if it were waiting for him to do something, to unlock the next piece of the puzzle. Harry had come this far, and the sense of destiny seemed to hum in the air, like a whisper of something ancient and powerful, far older than Hogwarts itself. The path ahead was unknown, but the broomstick had guided him through every step of this journey, and Harry was certain it would continue to lead him forward. He took a deep breath and turned to face the vast, empty space around him. The floor beneath him was smooth and gray, stretching far into the distance, and the sky above was a deep, endless black. There were no stars, no moon, just the oppressive darkness. But as Harry stood there, feeling the weight of the silence around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer alone. There was something else here, something watching him. The broomstick, which had been hovering quietly beside him, began to vibrate softly. Harry's pulse quickened. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but the vibrations grew stronger, resonating through the air, through the floor beneath him. The broomstick pulsed in time with Harry's heartbeat, and the faint, quiet hum of magic that had accompanied him since the beginning of this journey now filled the air with an undeniable force. And then, as if summoned by the broomstick's call, a light flickered in the distance. It wasn't a flash, but a soft, steady glow that grew brighter and brighter with each passing second. The light didn't come from any particular source. There were no lanterns, no candles. It simply appeared like a flame igniting in the dark, casting strange shadows on the smooth floor. The broomstick's vibrations intensified, the pulsing energy filling the space around Harry. It was as though the broom had recognized the light, as though it were drawing Harry toward it, guiding him through the dark toward the unknown. Harry took a cautious step forward. His instincts urged him to wait, to hesitate, but the light was too captivating, too magnetic. He moved closer, and as he did, the light took shape, slowly revealing its true form. It was a figure, but not a person, at least, not in the way Harry understood. The figure shimmered with an ethereal glow, its edges blurring as though it were made of light itself, and its presence filled the space around him with a deep, profound calm. The broomstick floated beside him, guiding him forward. As Harry stepped closer to the figure, the air seemed to change. The oppressive weight of the silence lifted, replaced by a subtle warmth, like the first light of dawn breaking over a cold landscape. There was no fear, no danger, only the sense that he was standing at the crossroads of something much greater than himself. The figure began to shift, its form becoming more defined, more solid. It was tall, cloaked in soft, radiant light, but it was not a human form. It seemed more like a projection, an apparition of something powerful, something ancient. The figure's face remained shrouded in shadow, but Harry could feel its gaze upon him, a presence that seemed to peer into the very core of his being. For a moment, Harry stood frozen, the broomstick now hovering in front of him, its quiet hum the only sound in the room. The figure reached out, its hands glowing faintly, as it extended its arm toward him. Harry Potter. The voice that emerged was soft, yet unmistakably clear. It wasn't loud, but it resonated deeply within Harry's chest. You have chosen the path of discovery, of understanding. But what is it you seek? The question hung in the air, and Harry's heart skipped a beat. What was it he sought? The answer was complicated, layered with years of questions, fears, and desires. But as he stood there, looking into the shimmering figure, something inside him clicked. The answer wasn't as complex as he had imagined. It was simpler than that. I seek the truth, Harry said quietly, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The truth of the magic, the broomstick, and the key. Why am I here? What is the purpose of all this? The figure seemed to nod, a ripple of energy flowing through the air as if acknowledging Harry's words. There was a moment of silence, the hum of the broomstick fading into the background, and then the figure spoke again, its voice carrying a deep, reverberating power. You are here because you are meant to be, the figure said. This broomstick has chosen you. It is not merely an object of sport, but an artifact of a time long forgotten. It is a key to the forgotten history of magic, one that is bound to the heart of Hogwarts itself. Harry's heart raced. The broom, an artifact of forgotten magic? He had known there was something unique about it, but this revelation made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The key that you sought to open, the figure continued, is but a fragment of a greater whole. It unlocks more than physical spaces. It unlocks the truths of the past, the ones buried beneath layers of time and forgotten history. The broomstick you hold is a part of that history, and you, Harry Potter, are the one chosen to rediscover it. The weight of the figure's words settled heavily on Harry's chest. He felt the broomstick's energy pulsing softly beside him, as though it were alive with purpose. The broom wasn't just a broom, it was a vessel of ancient magic, of forgotten secrets. But why me? Harry asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why did the broom choose me? What do I have to do with any of this? The figure remained still for a long moment, its form rippling slightly, as though it were deep in thought. Then it spoke again, its voice more gentle this time, though still powerful. You have always been connected to magic, Harry. Your very existence is entwined with the ancient forces that shaped the wizarding world. You are the one who must rediscover what was lost, for only one who has lived through the trials of the past can truly understand the path ahead. Harry's breath caught in his throat. This was more than he had ever imagined. His life, his connection to magic, was part of something much larger, something older than Hogwarts itself. You will face trials ahead, the figure warned, but they will not be in the form of dark wizards or beasts. No, the true trials are those of the heart, of understanding, of letting go of the things you think you know. The broomstick will guide you, but only you can walk the path to its true power. The broomstick hummed louder now, as if responding to the figure's words. Harry stood still, his mind racing as the weight of what the figure had said settled into his heart. The figure's form began to fade, its light dimming as if the moment of revelation was drawing to a close. "Remember, Harry Potter," it said softly, "you hold the key, but the true question is whether you are ready to unlock it." And with that, the figure disappeared, leaving Harry alone once again in the vast, empty space. But he no longer felt alone. The broomstick, its energy still pulsing beside him, seemed to hold a new sense of purpose. Harry took a deep breath, his heart steady, his mind clearer than it had been before. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he knew that the broomstick was not merely a guide. It was a companion, and together they would uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long. He had the key. The question now was, what would he choose to unlock? The broomstick floated gently beside Harry, its soft hum vibrating through the air. The figure had vanished, leaving only the faint echo of its words hanging in the air like a forgotten dream. The vast, empty space around him seemed to breathe with a quiet rhythm, the stone floor beneath his feet smooth and cool. The silence had returned, but this time it wasn't oppressive. It was a peace that settled into Harry's chest, a calm that had taken root in the very core of him. For a moment, Harry stood still, allowing the stillness to wash over him. The revelation he had just received was still fresh in his mind. The broomstick, the key, the figure, all of it was part of something greater than he had ever imagined. He had always known that his life was tied to magic, but now, standing in this silent, timeless space, he felt it more than ever. He was part of something ancient, something that stretched back through the ages, and yet he didn't need to fully understand it right away. The broomstick had chosen him, and he had taken the first step on a path that would guide him toward the truth. The weight of the broomstick's magic still pulsed softly beside him, like a quiet heartbeat. Harry reached out, fingers grazing the smooth wood of the handle once more. There was a sense of reassurance in the touch, as though the broom itself were telling him that everything was as it should be. He didn't need to rush. He didn't need to have all the answers now. With a soft sigh, Harry turned his gaze from the pedestal and the flickering light that had once seemed so mysterious. The space around him, though vast, felt warmer now, as though the air itself had shifted. He could feel the magic still lingering, but it wasn't heavy. It was a presence that surrounded him gently, like a protective shield, a reminder that the journey was far from over. He looked around, his eyes tracing the familiar yet strange outlines of the room. The walls, once cloaked in shadow, now seemed less imposing. The faint glow of the symbols etched into the stone had softened, and the broomstick, with its calming hum, continued to hover beside him, a steady companion on this journey. Harry smiled softly to himself. There was a quiet satisfaction in the knowledge that though the path ahead was uncertain, he was no longer alone. The broomstick had not only guided him here, but had also given him the clarity to understand that this was just one chapter in a much larger story. He would continue to follow the magic, step by step, unlocking the secrets that had been hidden for so long. But for now, there was no need to rush. The answers would come in time. He glanced back at the archway that had once marked the threshold of the hidden room. The dark corridor beyond seemed no longer as daunting. It had always been there, waiting, but now it felt like a doorway to more than just another room. It was a doorway to the next stage of his journey. Harry knew he wasn't ready to return just yet, but that was okay. For the first time, he felt a deep, unwavering trust in the path that was unfolding before him. The broomstick hovered gently in front of him, and Harry reached out to touch it once more. This time, there was no sense of urgency, no overwhelming pull. It was simply a quiet connection, one that reassured him that everything was as it should be. The magic that had guided him here was still with him, and he was ready to walk the next step of the journey whenever that moment arrived. The light from the distant figure had faded, but the memory of its presence lingered, like the soft echo of a dream fading into the morning. Harry knew that he would carry its words with him, the quiet reminder that the truth was not something to be unlocked all at once. It would unfold in its own time, at its own pace. With one last, lingering glance at the pedestal, Harry turned and began to walk back toward the archway, his footsteps echoing softly in the quiet room. The broomstick followed him, its steady hum keeping pace with his steps. There was no need to hurry. The answers would come when they were meant to, and Harry had all the time in the world to discover them. The silence that enveloped him now was not one of isolation, but of peace. The weight of the world, the uncertainty that had once clouded his mind, had begun to lift. He felt a quiet strength within himself, a sense of purpose that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to surface. The broomstick was his guide, but ultimately, it was Harry who would walk the path. The stone corridor beyond the archway no longer felt as foreign. It was no longer a space filled with mystery and danger. Instead, it was just another part of the journey, a quiet passage that led Harry toward whatever lay ahead. He would continue, step by step, following the broomstick's hum, trusting that it would lead him exactly where he needed to be. And with that, Harry took a deep, steadying breath, his heart calm and centered. He knew that the adventure was far from over, but for now, he was at peace. He was exactly where he needed to be, and that was enough. The broomstick glided alongside Harry, its steady hum a soft, reassuring presence in the stillness of the room. As he continued down the stone corridor, the air around him seemed to grow lighter, the weight of the unknown easing with every step. The path before him was unclear, but Harry didn't feel the anxiety he once would have. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of trust, as if the journey, though long, was unfolding in its own time, and he was exactly where he needed to be. The silence in the space was no longer empty. It was filled with the gentle, comforting rhythm of the broomstick's hum, a reminder that even in the unknown, there was always something guiding him forward. There was no need for haste, no rush to find all the answers. The journey itself, each moment, each discovery, was as important as the destination. Harry let out a slow breath, allowing the calm to wash over him. He could feel the magic that had carried him this far still humming quietly around him, while the broomstick's presence, a constant, soothing companion. The room, the corridor, the space beyond, all were simply part of the adventure, part of the larger mystery, and he knew that with each step he took, the next part of the journey would reveal itself, gently, in its own time. There was no longer any fear, no pressing need to understand it all at once. Harry understood now that some mysteries, some truths, would reveal themselves when he was ready, when the time was right. For now, all he needed to do was trust in the process, trust in the broomstick, and trust in himself. As the stone corridor stretched before him, he felt a warmth settle in his chest, a quiet reassurance that no matter where this path led, he would be ready. The answers would come in time, and he would be there to meet them, one step at a time. With a soft smile, Harry took another steadying breath, the weight of uncertainty now nothing more than a distant echo. The broomstick hovered beside him, its magic a constant source of comfort, and Harry knew that as long as he followed it, he would never be alone on this journey. And so, with peace in his heart and a quiet trust in the adventure ahead, Harry continued forward, knowing that the path would always lead him to where he needed to go.